You think about the great volunteer organisations like Surf Lifesaving. They save a lot of lives a year. They don't get paid. We're a nation of epic volunteering community work. It'd be good if rites of passage was held in that kind of regard, so more people would wrap around it and go, right, rites of passage time, not like, oh, it's summer now, time to go and patrol the beach. That would be nice.
Yeah, it just means that our teenage boys are potentially drowning in a different context.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to What is a Rite of Passage? Our guest today is Garry Thomson. Garry is a social entrepreneur with a passion for empowering families and also a fantastic artist. His positions include CEO at Uplifting Australia and COO of Pathways Foundation. We acknowledge the Jara and the Bundjalung people, the traditional custodians of the land where this is being recorded. We acknowledge elders and knowledge holders, past, present and emerging, and may their ceremonies and initiations be remembered, and may this feed and heal the country on which we live, work and play. Welcome, Garry.
Thank you, Damien. Nice to see you. We've chatted on the phone, but I've never seen your face before.
No, it's good to get that happening, hey?
Yeah.
Tell me about that painting, Garry.
Oh, mate, that's it's a happy giraffe. Yeah. I've been dabbling in quite a lot of art. I've sold a fair bit of art, and yeah, it's just something I do. Brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah. I've just got a bit of a regulation question, which can also tend to help me to get regulated. And I feel like we might have already spoken to it a little bit, but how do you regulate yourself, man? What makes your heart sing?
I think being healthy and being fit and doing things that I enjoy. What about yourself?
I'm becoming increasingly aware that this project and these conversations regulate the shit out of me. They just really bring me home to myself, and I get this opportunity through a topic that I'm passionate about to understand other people, but also to understand myself. And then we've spoken about surfing a bit. Often if I sort of dig inside, and what am I doing if I'm when I'm at that place and it's definitely in the water, either underwater or on the water, moving and dance. I love dance and I love music. Music seems to be a language that brings me back to myself as well.
Yeah, speaking of surfing, I've just returned from a surf trip to the Maldives. And it was small, but it was fun. I trained for like 3 months for double overhead barrels, and I got shoulder height peel and waves. So it was still good though.
Over-prepared.
Over-prepared.
Fantastic. Any bodily issues? I noticed for myself, if I surf for 3 days or something without training, my neck gets really cooked. Do you get any particular issues from surfing if you don't put in that work?
Oh, I think if I'm not training, then pretty much everything hurts. But no, I think, I mean, it's a little bit like life. It's if you're prepared, things tend to go pretty well.
Yeah, great. Well, jumping straight into it, in the context of contemporary rites of passage, can you give us a bit of background on your history in the work?
Yeah, I guess I was doing youth work and social work, for many years. And prior to that, I'd been involved in men's work since my mid-20s. And I'd been on a couple of gatherings. I went on a 15-day experience in Central Australia with the Pitjantjatjara people. And yeah, I'd been on quite a lot of local North Coast men's gatherings. So I understood the power of men's work. And then, yeah, I was working in Mullumbimby doing youth work, and I met a bunch of guys that were doing rites of passage around the local area, and I went on a program with them. I was also an educator, like I'm trained kind of teacher and facilitator and program developer. And so I wound up, being part of joining the Pathways Foundation. And at that time, there were like 7 guys that had been doing the work, and they're much more experienced than me. And we had quite an ambitious target to make rites of passage widely available around Australia. So I guess my first role was to work closely with them and those 7 fellas, and get their wisdom and their knowledge and attempt to make a program manual and develop a facilitator training. So we did that, and then we trained men, like hundreds of men from 7 different regions around Australia: Southeast Queensland, North Coast, Sydney, Bellingen, South Coast of Sydney, Melbourne, Tasmania, and Perth. And yeah, I was there for 8 years, kind of heading up with a lot of support from a great team, developing and facilitating that leadership training and rites of passage programs all over Australia.
And out of that experience, what stood out? What about contemporary rites of passage in Australia did you come to understand?
I mean, there's so much there. Um, Firstly, I mean, there's the boys that, there's the program experience, which there was a lot of learning there, and then there's the idea of training people and facilitator training. There's a lot there, and then kind of regional development learnings, and things we did right, and big mistakes we made. And I think at the end of the day, everybody that was involved in Pathways, like I was there from around 2001 to 2009. It was a high growth period. At our peak, we were running about 40 programs a year, which included facilitator training, like a program for younger kids. We started with a group of women running women's programs. There was corporate leadership training, and then the rites of passage programs themselves. And yeah, we had an ambitious idea that we could hit a tipping point of 11% of the population. And yeah, after 9 years and spending a lot of money, yeah, we didn't come close to that. But I think everybody that was involved, from office staff to, you know, a lot of facilitators, a lot of volunteers, everyone can be pretty proud of what we did achieve. And I think the seeds of Pathways are still alive and kicking, in different ways, in different areas, and are being interpreted differently by everybody. But I still can see there's activity in the rites of passage space that came from that time. But yeah, we learn a lot. I think it is probably useful to break it down into those different areas and talk about them, because there's just so much there. Like the idea of the program itself,
Mhm.
like why do a program?
Mm.
What are we doing? What This idea of a contemporary rite of passage and an initiation. It's a different idea if you think about culturally, and First Nations people in Australia and all over the world. It was such a normal part of their cultural fabric. I think they obviously made it really important, and they had time, and other things, could just wait for that to be a central thing that happened. Whereas in a contemporary world, people are busy. They're working hard. They're earning the money they need to earn to get ahead, and trying to get people to value a rite of passage and prioritize it over, other family expenses and time, and often using their leave, their annual leave or whatever. It was tricky. Um, and I think we made a massive assumption that a need equals a want. We were totally convinced that there's a massive need. If every boy in Australia did a rite of passage, we'd live in a different world. But people, every family in Australia doesn't want to go on a rite of passage,
Mm.
or doesn't have the time or the resources to allocate to that. So I think there's a lot of things that we can say people need, but do they want it? Normally, no, they don't want it. And people don't value prevention until there's an issue. So, but in terms of the actual program itself, I think the dads, what are we initiating boys into is, I think, a deeper connection with their father or their mentor.
Mm.
The majority of boys would come with their father, and in saying that, there's a lot of boys around that don't have an active father in their lives, and some would come with their mentors. So, yeah, fostering that connection. I think also we're initiating them into the reality of being a man. I don't know about you, Damien, but when I was like 13, 14, 15, I didn't really think about manhood that much, and it was pretty unconscious, like, just watching the men would get drunk at a barbecue and the women would be over there, you know, whinging about their husbands. I mean, that's very stereotypical, but that was the manhood version I saw. And then, being a surfer and hanging around the beach, manhood was who could catch the biggest waves and who could pull the biggest cones in the back of the paddy wagon. Not the paddy wagon, the panel van. And
There's a thought.
yeah, so this idea of a conscious rite of passage and exposing the boys into what it means to be a man, and men sharing their stories. And I think for the boys to go, oh, wow, men are quite diverse. Men have struggles, men have power, men have wins and losses. And, they're not, this is what men are. They're a lot of different things, and they're deep and they're meaningful. And I think there's that. Also, I think we're initiating the boys into a sense of belonging, that, you belong as a man in this world, regardless of your orientation, whether you're gay or straight or black or white or disabled or however you identify, that it's actually okay. And there's still a place for you, in this world amongst men. Also giving them a sense of their own gifts and their own power so that they can go and hopefully share that in the community. And in saying that, we're dealing with, if a boy comes on a program around 13, 14, 15, they've already had 13 years of, their family, whatever's alive in that family, from whatever traumas may be there or challenges, or no family's perfect, right? Including mine. And the idea that you're going to come on a program for 4 or 5 or 6 days and somehow that's going to change your life from the 13 years you've just had. I think it's not a realistic idea. In saying that, I still think it's worth doing, because if they don't, have those experiences of the mature masculine, then they're probably not going to get it anywhere else. It's not taught at school. It's not readily role modeled. Um, I think churches do a lot of family stuff. Not a church going man myself, but outside of the churches and maybe Boy Scouts, and then there's sport, like weekend sports, and then there's school. I think all of those experiences, some of them are very healthy, some of them are unhealthy, but none of them are offering the same experience that a rite of passage offers, when it's done in a healthy way.
Yeah, I can think of trades as another one that's huge. I went through a carpentry apprenticeship as a 16-year-old young lad.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I reckon that's the Aussie rite of passage, right? And I've got a whole lens that I see that experience through.
Yeah, and then there's like the alcohol and the drugs and the womanizing is, I think unconsciously boys are looking for status, and they also understand where they are in a pecking order. I think, to be general, if you go to a school, most boys know, well, he's the fastest runner, he's the slowest runner, and boys kind of know where they are in that line, and so they kind of think they're better than or worse than, almost as a complex.
Mhm.
I think a rite of passage kind of neutralizes all that and says, you know what, we've all got value, and I think, but again, you're fighting against a social structure and trying to do something in 5 days. But yeah, I don't think it's a silver bullet. There's just too many other factors and cultural experiences that happen outside that, probably still have the major influence.
Yeah, I love that term, silver bullet, and it comes up kind of regularly enough in conversations with people that have got that experience. And certainly, yeah, there's nothing about this podcast that's selling the work, or at least if it is, I've been doing a really bad job of it. Um, but yeah, in regards to that silver bullet, I guess you've spoken to the cultural context. Yeah, what else? Can you think of anything else that it misses?
That what misses?
That this experience, this rites of passage experience, where it's not landing.
Oh, look, I think it comes back to that need versus a want. I
Mm.
think everybody that, like yourself and so many men that do this work, or people that have been on it, they understand it. But I don't think there's a critical mass of families banging down the door saying, "Where's my rites of passage for my son?" Um, the other thing is, I think looking broadly at families, family are like a system. If you think about four tires on a car, if one goes flat, you can't drive the car. And, families are like that. If somebody's wobbly, it affects everybody. And I think a rite of passage does attempt to be a whole of family experience because, it should be honoring the mums and including the mums and thanking them for all the work they've done and looking at how the relationship between a young man and a mother can be healthy and can be reshaped. But in terms of a whole family system, again, it's a drop in the ocean, 4 or 5 days. In saying that, sometimes a conversation can change the course of somebody's life. So I wouldn't want to underestimate the impact, but yeah, it depends what happens when they get home. I think that's the value of having the father or a close mentor there, that the boy's not just going home by himself after having this amazing experience, and hopefully it stays alive in some way and becomes part of the family system. But yeah, because there's not an ongoing kind of connection or ongoing experience, I think it's going to be up to that family to integrate and to keep that alive. And whether they do or not, I think, yeah, some kind of post program, something is probably would be a good idea.
Yeah, and it's about resources too, hey? Like, it's my experience, it takes a family a lot of resource to get to a rite of passage experience,
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of resources to do the follow-up as well.
Yeah. And they're hard to fill. Like when we were doing the regional development at Pathways, we had like 7 regions, and it was tough, to get I think our break even was about 10 participants at, about $800 a couple. So about 8 grand was break even, and that was for venue, food, flights, flying senior facilitators in until the regions became, able to take it or got the shits with us and just took it.
Mm.
Um, which some of them needed to do. I thought, I get that.
Mm.
And yeah, it was a struggle to find 8, 10, 12 families that wanted to come onto a program, even though we were convinced it's the best thing in the world. And I'd say 99% of people that went on a program would leave saying that was the best thing in the world. But
Yeah.
people don't know what they don't know, and it's really hard to fill programs and get people to value this. I mean, there's been a lot of good work done in marketing, and some individuals have really championed the cause, for 15 years, and it's still, unless you niche marketing in a, wealthy suburb or something like that. But as a community grassrootsy thing, I still think it's really hard to make a living, to make a living out of it is tricky business. And to it, the amount of effort it takes just to break even, it's tough. So yeah, I think it can be reimagined and somehow.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Circling back to your families aren't knocking your door down to initiate their sons. I felt like on this last event, yeah, I took on enrollments, and I just felt like I was knocking on families' doors. Like it got that hard.
Yeah.
And I enrolled a friend of our family, single mother. She just so short on resources in every possible way. Just by some stroke of luck, she had her mum's partner who'd had a little bit of experience with men's work, and just he rolled in and he just really played that supporting role in this amazing way. Everything went wrong with this young fella. He snuck his phone in, he pinned his mum at a really inappropriate time, freaked her out. They've left me here. I haven't eaten. I
Oh
haven't.
my God.
Full on, full on. And so sort of we managed our way through that. And it was a last ditch effort. She called me and just said, "Okay, I get what you're inviting me to now. I am out of ideas. I do not know what to do now." And last I checked in with that family, on the return, what that boy presented to his mum was that blew my mind. Like the way he showed up and the way she received him was just like, "Oh fuck, we did it. We fucking did it." And 3 weeks later, their relationship was still completely different. And, it's probably closer to 4 or 5 weeks now, and it might have fallen apart, but that's 3 weeks. That's a shift. Like that's a real
Yeah. I
shift.
mean, I mean, that's a great outcome because you're giving people an experience and a taste of, a new 0 point almost. And once they've been there, they can, at least they know it's there.
Mm.
Whereas before they didn't know it was there. And you only have to change the course of somebody's life a tiny bit, and you project that out over a lifetime. And, you go like that and you go out, 40 years later, you wind up at a very different spot. Look, I'm pro rites of passage, don't get me wrong. I think it's fantastic. And,
Mm.
will it ever be valued by the majority of Australian families? I doubt it.
Yeah. So there's a question I've got for you, and you can either take it in the form of a metaphor or like straight up and down. Which one do you want?
I love metaphors.
All right, fantastic. So, a small percentage of teenagers get to do this work, as we've just established. It's highly impactful, but it reaches very few people. What's one seed we can take from the rites of passage experience that could be germinated in a larger field?
Look, I kind of dedicated 10 years of my life to answering this question. Uplifting Australia now is folded because I felt like I achieved my mission, and my mission was, how do we take the notion of a talking circle, which I think is one of the most powerful things that happens on a rite of passage, is when we're sitting down sharing story and being vulnerable and being real and being honest and listening to each other and, honoring each other's reality without judgment, hopefully. And, I think if we can get families to do that. So at Uplifting Australia, again, I was working with some really good people, and but largely it was out of my experience from Pathways and my being a dad myself and working with my wife, who came up with a model for a healthy emotional system for families that was based on listening, um, positive reinforcement, so taking strengths focus, emotional literacy, so being able to talk about how you're feeling and why, and accountability, so realizing the way that we behave impacts everybody in the family. So whether you're the parent towards the child or the child towards the parent, that should be equally accountable. So yeah, I wrote a program around that, and then COVID came and made it a digital program and
Yep.
scaled it, and then I gave it to Relationships Australia and worked for them as a consultant for 2 years. And now that program, there's about 1,500 families a week using it as a free program and sitting around having talking circles. So I think a rite of passage goes further than that, of course. But if you boil it down, if families can sit and listen and honor each other's strengths and talk about how they're feeling and know how to repair when they have blowouts and say sorry and take accountability and learn and grow. Mental health starts in families, not mental illness, that's something else, but emotional well-being leads to mental health. You know, it starts in families. So I believe in families and family systems and early intervention. And I guess everything I did was informed by my experiences at rites of passage. I think largely once you get to the teenage years, I think families struggle to make that transition in a healthy way. And there's a lot of, it's almost a social norm to say teenagers are a nightmare and that it's their fault. But
Mm.
I think what unconsciously families don't understand, that it's a time that the whole family needs to change. The teenager is changing so much that if 2 and 2 equals 4 and all of a sudden one of the twos, equals one of the twos turns to a 4 and you're like, no, the answer's still 4. And
Mm.
it's the two's problem for changing. Yeah, I think it's a time of mass family change. And if we could make something accessible on a family systems level around adolescent years and make that a normal part of society, I think, we'd have a different world.
Mm. Yeah, that's a picture.
Yeah.
That's a picture. Yeah, I really agree. I've recently become a lot more aware of the the shift in dynamic between the father and the teen, and what's expected of the father to allow that teen to grow into a new place. That father's now being asked to grow into a new place. And yeah, we might have spoken a little bit about how our program runs, but we don't give those fathers a lot of warning that that's going to be expected of them.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, they come along and have an experience, which is amazing. But then to go, well, look, over the next 5 years, you're going to need to keep changing and adapting. And this is what that looks like. That's not kind of done. I think traditionally in, First Nations societies, it was a different time. Obviously, I'm just imagining it was way more integrated than just an experience. And then you go back, kids go back to school and teams and mates, and the dads go back to work and, other things. And the mothers that tend to hold the emotional load of the family, are trying to deal with the change of the kid. And yeah, it's not like the whole of society is able to integrate a rite of passage experience because we're so busy doing everything else. So yeah, I think we could reimagine how we do that. Like what truly is a contemporary rite of passage? Is it an awesome 5-day experience and then back to life, or is it something else?
Yeah, just circling back to that, to that community picture. This teenager that I was mentioning just before on this previous event, um, is super energetic guy, really energetic. A little bit too much to handle, I think, for a lot of his educators. Before the event, he'd been suspended every couple of weeks for probably the whole year. And his teachers had worked out who he was. They'd worked out how to manage him, whatever. That was it. And he returned from that event probably slightly different. Um, and the story that I got was, yeah, one of his teachers was basically, "Oh, so you think you're a man now, do you?" Uh, and was unable through the resources at hand. And he's a high school teacher, and I get it, but unable to hold the possibility of a different uh, relationship with this young fella. I've made my mind up who you are. That's good enough for me. I'll go home tonight. Be with my family. Yeah, like it's in that integrated perspective. I think the whole community needs to grow,
Well,
not just
yeah,
the nuclear family.
that's what I mean. You have an awesome experience and then you go back to life, and it's still worth doing though. I'm paranoid. I'm not pro rite of passage here because I totally am. But yeah, I'm just into kind of thinking about it a bit broader. And yeah, and then like training people is a whole another category, right? Uh,
Yeah, that's a really good topic.
yeah,
What
because
are your thoughts?
well, if rites of passage is going to be growing and spreading, then we need more men that know how to do it. And I think we attempted to do that at Pathways. It's very complex. I talked about putting the training together, and most of those men that I was working with, they are masters of the work. But you know, it doesn't mean you're a good teacher. And great facilitators don't necessarily make good teachers. And I think the other kind of thing is it's hard to it's a really high skill to run a rite of passage program. You've got to be able to work with the men. You've got to be able to relate to teenagers. There's logistics. There's the emotional intelligence, the spiritual intelligence. There's the creative arts piece, like the storytelling, the music, the singing, and the teamwork, like working with a bunch of fellas and or we're talking about like freaking ninja skills, right? So very few people, we trained hundreds of guys, and I thought it was going to be easy, but it wasn't easy. And I think it's easier to identify where your lane is. Like some guys are naturally good at working with men, and some guys are great with kids, and some guys are good at logistics, and some men are poets and, musicians and storytellers and singers, and very few people are all of those things. So I think having a look at a team, like any team, if you think about a footy team, you have forwards and you have backs and halfbacks and fullbacks, and you wouldn't put a front rower at 5'8", or
Mm. Mm.
a halfback in the back row. And I think, yeah, when it comes to training people, I think it's about identifying all the different pieces that make up a great, highly successful team that can run this work. And I
Mm.
think when we were recruiting at Pathways, also the type of men that are attracted to this work, like if you're trying to teach somebody how to run a rite of passage, so there's program knowledge, but then if you're trying to teach them how to be a facilitator as well, I think you're looking for men that are already great facilitators. Like they might be outdoor ed people, or they're already coaches, or they're already leaders, but
Mm.
men that are actually good at that, like they're encouraging and they use positive psychology. They're good at setting boundaries and imparting, knowledge. But yeah, I think if I was running facilitator training these days, I'd be, putting out 4 or 5 different types of
Mm.
roles, and then I'd be recruiting for those roles and then training for those roles. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being really good and staying in your lane and realizing that's what makes a team. Like you don't get a halfback waking up going, I want to be a front rower, you know. They're happy to be a halfback. And but when it comes to rites of passage, everybody wants the glory roles of
Yeah.
holding the space and being seen to be the man. But then there's also like the founder's curse, which is if you are a master at this work, if you're working in a not-for-profit context, are you willing to get out of the way and let other people have a go? You know, and I think that's hard to do if you've given your life to something and you're really, really good at it, and you've got a chance to earn some money. Stepping aside and going, well, you know, I'll let someone else take that role and earn that money, and I'll be mission centric. I think that's tricky. So I see that in not for profits, like people that they're so good at the work and they just keep on facilitating and facilitating. They just keep on getting better. And then there's men there that are as good as they were 20 years ago, when they were leading, and they're
Mm.
like, oh, they're not good enough because they're not as good as me. But it's like, well,
Mm.
they are as good as you when you were leading 20 years ago, but because you're still there, they're not good enough. So I don't know the answer to that. Those people need to be honored and respected. And I get it that they're so bloody good at it. You can't imagine not having them there. But in terms of spreading the work and building capacity, that it's something that, we need to work out somehow. But I think at Pathways we trained a lot of people, but we felt like we still needed to parachute in senior leaders that were, masters of the work, rightly or wrongly. And it takes a long time to be good at this work unless you're already a gun facilitator, or you have an incredible natural ability. So I think when you come across someone like that, you got to let them through. You got to give them the opportunities to develop. I don't know. What do you do in your community with facilitator development? Yeah.
We don't do anything. We just the narrative that I received was when you've been here for long enough, you'll understand. You'll get an overview for it, and it'll all make sense.
Yeah.
And I kind of just sort of floundered around for 10 years, just kind of hiding in the shadows, trying to stick my neck out, bring some stuff, and it's like trying to kind of wanting to be that guy that was looking like he was being really valuable. And so there's that, and there's this other perspective that I've heard around this work. And so you're talking about facilitation in like in a really skills based sense, like real practical, real skills based sense. Um, and something that I've heard that I've seen and probably exists in me as well is that some men come to this work to give a gift that they weren't given, and that can show up as a wound or some wounded behaviour. And I know that it's come out a little bit sideways in in my wound as a child who grew up, whose version of adulthood kind of just looked like boyhood with alcohol. Um, and so, yeah, I came to the work wanting to give teenage boys something that I wasn't given. Um, and so, as much as how do you train the skills, how do you navigate wounds like that and behavior like that? Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. I mean, a massive percentage, like we train hundreds of men from all around Australia, and they paid decent money and airfares and accommodate, like they were invested. And but in saying that, I think the senior guys that are put on a massive pedestal, outside of the trainings, they're just normal people. They don't completely have their shit together, and there's things about them that aren't working amazingly. So I think everybody comes with unmet needs, and I think we, teach what we need to learn. I believe in that as well. So yeah, I don't think you get around that. It's just, can people use it in a positive way, or does it leak, in an unhealthy way? Is it toxic, or is it grounded, through the heart, or is it leaking out emotionally in a trauma kind of way? And yeah, the trauma kind of response, and it's not useful on a camp if you've got facilitators that are projecting their unmet needs or their trauma or their emotional reactions onto the camp, the fathers, other staff members. It's not good, and it happens. And
Mm.
that's another side of leading these things. You've got to be able to deal with staff, blowing out. But yeah, if people keep doing that, then yeah, they're probably not the right people to be doing the work. They need to go and deal with that stuff and then come back. But if you can be vulnerable and say, look, I got this going on, this is how I feel, and use that, I think it can be a really powerful strength. I don't know a man that doesn't have something going on.
Is there anything that you would teach in your facilitator training around how to do that piece well? Like vulnerably, I've got this
Yeah.
bit of work.
I mean, we would talk about it, but the senior guys, would do it as well. Behind the scenes would be like just as bad or worse than the participants that they were judging. So I don't know, is the answer. I don't think so. I mean, we touch on it.
Mhm.
We're here for the boys. We're here for the boys. This is not a time to do your own work. This is not a time to, if you need support, ask for it. If you're triggered, remove yourself, be responsible with it. But then some people, it just becomes more subtle, but just as toxic. So it's not obviously happening, but it's still happening. I think if you can't hold yourself, then yeah, you shouldn't be facilitating the work. You probably need to go and deal with that. Doesn't mean
Mm.
you're not of value at some point down the track, but yeah, we're not there to deal with our own stuff. And it's good to be vulnerable and ask for help when you need it. But I guess it's an emotional intelligence to be able to express how you're feeling and then pull it together and keep going. What do you think?
Yeah, what'd you say? Ninja skills?
Yeah,
Kind of is, isn't it?
it is. And I mean, there's skills and knowledge, and there's attitude and behavior. And some people come on these camps and they feel really powerful while they're there because people are putting them on a pedestal, and they're shit hot facilitators and they're revered and they do amazing work, but then they go home and their life's not like that. So it's almost like disingenuous. I don't know, dude. I think, yeah, you can still do good when you're not having completely got it together yourself. If we're waiting for the man that's completely whole and has no issues, then no one's ever going to do the work. Yeah.
There's something that's been rolling around in my head since the last conversation we had, and it probably comes back to men's work. Uh, and yeah, I think the question was, what's men's work initiating men into? And so how that question kind of landed with me, or as it bounced around in my head, was, are men being given a clear set of guidelines on what a man is? Like, as I understand that there can be a whole bunch of interpretation and variation in, some of the principles of men's work. And it can be a bit loose.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been on a men's gathering ever where they've gone, this is what a man is. This is what we're aiming at. Here's a set of, behavioral attitudes and behaviors that, are something to aspire to that we believe is a healthy man, or anything like that. I think ultimately it's just about owning the impact that you have on other people
Mm.
is one. And the other one is not shying away from your strengths and your gold and your value, and having the confidence to go out there and create a good life for yourself. There's a lot of you're not this or you're not that, or you've got this or you've got that, and probably not enough of you are this and you are that, and you can do this and you can do that. And yeah, I think men's work kind of came out of this notion of, if we don't deal with our stuff, we'll never be a good man, almost. And the other way of looking at it, I think, is if we identify our strengths and move towards being a person that we want to be, then we can go on and have a good life despite what's happened to us already. And I think, yeah, obviously they're both relevant, but it does feel out of balance to me that it's more deal with your shit, deal with your shadow, deal with your trauma, because it's having a negative impact on you and everybody around you. And, I think we're saying a good man does that and knows himself and deals with his pain and his struggles. I think being happy and being positive and being confident and being goal orientated and achieving great things and having a balanced life and being fit and healthy and in good physical shape and having a great marriage and, being in good relationship with whatever your sexual preferences are. And, yeah, being happy and making a difference and having good financial well-being and all that stuff doesn't seem to get much of a look in. Yeah, which, I think that stuff tends to be more in the realm of coaching and, professional life, and like the Anthony Robbins of the world that are like, you
Yep.
can do anything. And
Mm.
I think that stuff's really good and important. And I think men's work is way down the other end of the spectrum, to the point where, there was some men's group, I'd turn up and a lot of people would check in. This is, happening, that's happening, this is bad, this is whatever.
Mm.
I'd be like, my life's freaking awesome. I'm fucking killing it. I've been married for 28 years. I'm financially going really well. I'm fit and healthy. I fucking love it. And then, people would look at me like, I never heard anyone say that before. And I'd be like, what the fuck is going on here?
What's going on?
So, like, obviously they're both important, but
I had a female mentor tell me, she said something like, men's work has got to stop apologizing for what men have done in the past. And it's almost like that. What you're expressing is just, this giant apology. I can't express joy and wholeness in my life because I'm carrying this apology for what men have done to women in the past.
yeah, well, I mean, we don't need to do that unless we've, you know, done shit.
So,
But I think there is something about boys and men. Like, there's this thing in my community at the moment that boys are riding around on e-bikes late at night and chucking rocks at cars and then doing the big getaway. And, you go out at a pub, not that I do that much these days, but, and it's the men that are fighting, and not always, it's some women, but it's like young women aren't riding around on e-bikes throwing rocks at cars. And I don't know what it is about men, but we've got this warrior energy deep within us. And yeah, it can manifest in really unhealthy ways and cause big problems for women and society. And it can manifest in beautiful ways. And, we can go on and have epic lives and, create really good things for other people along the way. So does men's work, aim to build that bridge between those two worlds? I think it I think that's the idea of it, right? I think we're doing great. I think it's great that there's men's work and that men are getting together and saying there's an issue, and, we're doing our best to try to create a space to help people heal and grow and become better versions of themselves, not just for them, but for everybody. And I'm really proud of men for doing that, and that there's so much of it around. And yeah, it's not perfect, but it's way better than nothing. And it's an evolutionary thing. It's almost like this is where we're up to, especially as white men trying to find, well, what is our culture in men's work? Because, I think First Nations people, have a very long story of culture around coming together as men and coming together as women. And I think, you know, white people in Australia, I don't know how long it is now. It's like 3 generations, 4 generations. And it's probably just the last one or two. I mean, obviously it would have been happening and I don't know about it, but as a mainstream thing, men's groups, men's initiation, rite of passage, all of this stuff in white society, I think, yeah, it's probably less than 50 years old or something. So it's pretty new and it's
Mm.
evolving, in a really good way. And and it's good to see First Nations people come along and be a part of some of that stuff as well. But I think as visitors to this country, I think we're doing a good job to find our roots in that way.
thanks, Gary.
Mm.
Yeah, well, this has been such a rich conversation. I think it's covered everything that I wanted and more. Is there anything else you think or feel or want to say while we're here?
Oh, dude, I don't know. I don't even know what I said.
Perfect.
Yeah, I just feel like I've said a lot, but I guess I just end by saying, yeah, I think we need to keep going. And if you feel the call to run rites of passage, it's not easy, but it's great work. And if you want to get involved in a men's group, you know, it's not perfect, but it's great work and it's evolving. And learning to be vulnerable and share and be open and respect yourself and your brothers and the feminine and to be non-violent and be compassionate and to realize that you can be awesome as well, and that you've got strengths and you can be confident, you can be happy, you can have a good life, and you can have it all. I think, yeah, let's go. Let's keep going. What about you?
Yeah, I just feel really charged about this work at the moment. Leaning into this podcast was kind of a step outside of my comfort zone in a sense of but essentially I think I was on a little bit of a process or in a little meditation, just asking myself, what would the man that speaks about this work in an effective way look like? What would he sound like and what would he do? And yeah, I saw myself doing this podcast and through that I've reached out to people to interview, and sometimes that's been a little bit frightening to be able to put myself into some of those conversations, and always rewarding, ridiculously rewarding, and always came back with the feedback that uh, I'm a person worth having a conversation with. Um, and then, this project doesn't have a lot of listeners, but I know that it's collating all of these stories that, as far as I know, don't exist anywhere. And I get to be the person to pull that together, and it feels really easy. It feels really on mission. And like I said at the start, yeah, I feel like I'm home to myself when I'm doing it and when I'm having these conversations.
Yeah. What is your goal with the podcast?
Yeah, it's a good question. To start off with, I wasn't quite sure. I think it was I thought it was to promote rites of passage, but it's not, because clearly no one's going to buy in on this conversation. It's kind of quite depressing, really,
Oh,
as far
what?
as
Fuck.
So it's what shifted into gear early was that this is a practitioner focused thing. And it came from me and that 10 years of not knowing what I was doing. I was either going to call it what is a rite of passage or what the fuck are we doing? And I'm still not sure. I still might change the name. But it's for people like me that want a resource, that want to get a better understanding, or, from a different end. And where we were really, really grassroots. And, I kind of knew that Arne Rubinstein was out there doing his thing, and I would meet people that had done his training or done the weekends, or we would lose families to Rites of Passage Institute or something like that. But apart from that, I just really didn't know what was out there and what this work was like. And ever since starting this, which was just a very short time ago, my understanding's just become so much broader.
Yeah. And why was it depressing?
Yeah, that was a bit of a joke.
Oh, thank God.
No, it was a total joke, mate. It was only because, like I said, it's not selling.
Not selling a dream.
It's not selling some dream. It's being really honest and upfront that if you want to get into this work, it's not easy. Being that door knocker in the last 6 months or so for an event was fucking hard
Yeah.
work. Really, really hard work, and I started to wonder. You framed it really well. It's what we need, but is it what we want? Or it's what families need, is it what families want? And I didn't really quite have a reference for that, but it was certainly what I was feeling when I was doing it. It was like, why do I feel like I'm selling this work? Because it really doesn't feel like the right thing to be doing.
Oh, mate. I felt like I think a lot of people in Pathways, we used to say that exact thing. We're out there banging down the doors, trying to convince people to come and do the best thing in their life. It's like, it's weird, right? Maybe one day there'll be a critical mass or a tipping point, and it'll be like, will it ever be like Indigenous society where rites of passage is a done deal and everyone does it and everyone knows about it and it's just a normal part of the community? Probably not. But I don't know, maybe it's bringing more positive behaviors into things like trades and how peer groups function and how sporting coaches show up and, all those kind of unconscious and, moments, how families function around adolescence. And because at the moment, it's a bit hit and miss, that stuff.
As far as existing programs that are targeting some of
Well,
that
it's
stuff, do you
just
mean?
our attitudes and behaviors in society.
Yeah,
Yeah,
got it.
you know, like you can get wounded by a school teacher and they're supposed to be there teaching you. Well, you can get wounded by a coach. How do we chip away at that and get people to value like a rite of passage when all that's going on? Now, that was depressing. How many people did you get on your last program?
5.
Yeah. And you worked your ass off for 3 months. Yeah. I know. It's fucking mental, isn't it? And you didn't make money, I'm sure.
Yeah, I reckon that. I reckon we lean on a narrative, right? And the narrative, I love it, but here's the narrative. Your place on this event has already been paid for by the person that did the event before you. We already have enough money to run this event. Your subscription fee will be paying for the next family.
Is that true?
It is true. Well, it's a way of framing it, but I guess what it means is that we kind of run events at cost, and that's the cost of the food, the insurance,
Yeah.
and that's it, man. Like no one's getting paid.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But you think about the great volunteer organizations like Surf Life Saving, they save a lot of lives a year. They don't get paid, Boy Scouts and it just, netball mums and soccer mums and footy committees. And it just, we're a nation of epic volunteering community work. It'd be good if rites of passage was held in that kind of regard, so more people would wrap around it and go, oh, right, rites of passage time. Not like, oh, it's summer now, time to go and patrol the beach.
Mm.
That would be nice. Mm.
Yeah, it just means that our teenage boys are potentially drowning in a different context.
They are. So you'll edit this, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Thanks.
I will. I will. I will.
I mean, apart from the bit I said to take out, I'm happy with the rest.
Now, me too.
Yeah.
And and I did make that joke about it being depressing and yeah, sorry if that had any impact.
No, I get it because like a lot of people, can you stop recording now and we can keep talking?
Okay, so before I do that, thanks, Gary. This has been amazing.
No.
No, that was shit. I want to do that again.
All right.
How are we going to do this now? All right. Thank you so much, Gary, for your time. This has been a rich conversation.
You're welcome, Damien, and thanks for your efforts in trying to make the community better.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, poor. That was a rough ending.
That's all right.